Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for coming for this shiur on the first yahrzeit of Arlene. And just to begin, and also people here and also people on Zoom who are listening here or remotely from the States even as such. And just like Rabbi Manning and other places would say, please silence your cell phone now so we don't have other interruptions. And remind you to put them up? Okay, we'll try to remind you to put them up. As we begin Parshat Shmos and Sefer Shmos, this is a time where the book has changed from the family of Yaakov into the nation of Yisrael. And one of the ideas is people have said Abraham, anybody who calls Avram has sinned, but Yaakov and Yisrael can be used interchangeably. But in a sense, they do have two different meanings along the way. And the idea is that we do go into becoming a nation, becoming an exile, and this is the prelude of coming into the land of Israel. And it was something that Arlene, on her trip to Israel, always wanted to come back. It was once we came to Israel, we were just temporarily in that exile, that gullus of America, the Golden Medina of Brooklyn, and just waiting to return. But I just want to say one thing that she picked up from here that I didn't share at another point. I don't know how much goes by. People the OU people might know. If you ever remember Shulamit Newman, who used to run these tours with her husband Yehoshua. And remember the old days. Before your time, Rabbi Manning? Before your time. I won't say at one point that she kind of like retired out or was retired out, but just the same. On one of the trips to Israel, Arlene had gone to Shulamit's house on a Shabbos afternoon. And this was one of the things that, she had learned from there, that there was actually the famous women's shiur Shabbos afternoon to go to a house, just like you have here, the KLE, the Katamon Learning Experience, that there was that. And when she came back, she realized that this did not happen over there. And she did did start a weekly women's shiur, mostly in our house, if she couldn't get anybody else to do it, arranging speakers each week for it. And it really didn't exist in the neighborhood before. So that was her bringing Israel back to the house. Unfortunately, there were times the speakers canceled, and even I had to fill in for the week. And if you think it's easy trying to prepare for a shiur, with 2 days' notice to talk for 45 minutes to an hour, it's not, as it goes by. But if you take a look at the first pasuk of the Pasha, I don't really mean to overdo it, but the Parsha begins with Ve'elu Shmos. These are the names of Bnei Yisrael, Haba'im Mitzrayim, that came into Egypt. At Yaakov, with Yaakov, Ish Ubeito Ba'o. Every man and his household came in. And this, we talk about the names. And Rabbi Manning had given a shiur about the names. And anyone who goes, should always look up, rabbimanning.com. Or the OU, and it will be there. You can find things in it, the OU website, outour.org, to find that. And we talk about what is a Jewish name. Now, Arlene had, in a sense, 3 names. Basically her English name that was given to be in Gullus, the Arlene, which actually has a second name, Freyda, which, of course, everybody calls, all Israeli people call you by the second name because they never know how to read it. They will always, on a telephone, call you that second name, because they don't know when there's 2 names in it, what to do with it. But in Hebrew, it's Avigayil Freyda. And the Avigayil is the Tanakhi name. The Arlene is the Gullus name. And the Freyda is the Yiddishism that comes from the Altahaim. So she was an embodiment of all of that. She really spanned the generations, kept the old roots, and then became whatchamacallit, had her anglicized and came back to Israel. And what is Avigayil good for over here? It's good for her website, her email address. And also, whenever you want to make a reservation in a restaurant or you want to go to Aroma, you have to say you're Avigayil. They're not going to know any other name to deal with it. So that's what she actually uses the name from that. Now, it's a pleasure to have Rabbi Manning with us. She had gone to Rabbi Manning's shiur all the time when she was in Israel. It was something that COVID happened at the same time that things turned to Zoom. So she was still able to continue that, and that was actually during her time of illness. So she even didn't miss it during her illness. She was able to Zoom it along the way. Rabbi Manning, we're glad he was agreed to speak on her behalf and on her yahrzeit. He is, just a little of the bio from this, he is the co-director of Midreset Tehillah after he worked in MMY, which we knew somebody who was in Shevet Lumi at MMY now type of thing, and was a senior lecturer at Chappelle's Midreset Rachel. And as I say, and of course, the OU connection. Many of you here have gone to the OU to hear him. And we're just so glad that he came today. And we thank you, Rabbi Manning, to speak. Oh, sorry. The microphone has to pass on. Otherwise, I'm not going to speak for the next hour.
Where would you like me to take this?
Wherever you play.
This is good.
Right.
Thank you very much, Phil, and good evening to everybody. I apologize in advance that I don't have a lot of voice, but it should be enough for this forum. I had a few other shiurim that I was meant to give today. I canceled everything, but I didn't, under any circumstances, want to cancel this because it's a very big honor and it's a excuse me, it's a privilege to be able to speak with a group of people who, many of whom I see around and about in Katzman, the OU, etc., but also on behalf of the Sevrinskys, Arlene and Libadl Ben Chaim L'Chaim Phil, as Phil said, still are devotees of the shiur. Arlene was somebody who, as you heard, valued very much Talmud Torah and wanted to increase Talmud Torah. And there's nothing, I think, that's more suitable than having a yahrzeit shiur. I hope this is the first of many opportunities, not with me specifically, but with other people, that you can get together and you can learn Torah, we can learn Torah, and in doing so, we can bring an aliyah to the neshama of Avigayil Freyda bas Mordechai, in the way that she very much would have wanted, from my relationship with her in the shiur. But of course, our relationship actually goes a little bit beyond that. I don't know if there's a word for this in English. There should be, but I relate to the Sevrinskys as the parents of the neighbors of my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. And there should be a word for that relationship because every time we went, my wife's sister Ruth lives in Bet Shemesh, and Richie and Amy are their neighbors. And every time, it seems to be many of the times we went to visit Mark and Ruth, so Phil and Arlene were there. So that it's nice to be able to know people in different capacities and continue relationships with different generations as you go through. So I picked a topic, Phil and I discussed it, which I think Arlene would enjoy, but also which I hope you will enjoy. And I think it's very practical. It's very, very much part of everybody's life on a daily basis. And it's actually much more complex than people think. I want to talk about the issue of good judgment and bad judgmentalism, and very specifically a mitzvah in the Torah of B'tzedek Tishpot Amitecha. Now, hardly anyone even recognizes that phrase usually. If you say to people, oh, Don Lekaf Zchut, oh, I know what that means. Don Lekaf Zchut is what people recognize from Pirkei Avot. You judge people favorably. But most people, in my experience, have a fairly fluffy understanding of what that means. Oh, yeah, everybody's nice, and you think good things about people, but you and I know that everybody isn't nice. And if you walk around thinking good things about anybody, that makes you technically in halacha what's called a friar. I think and that's definitely, there is no mitzvah to be a friar. And also you won't be able to protect yourself, make good decisions, protect your family. If you walk around thinking everybody is wonderful, you have to be a little bit more judicious in the way that you see people. And we'll see that the idea that Dan Lekaf Zchut is some kind of rose-tinted view of the world is just a mistake. And people have not learnt it with the kind of halachic analysis that all mitzvahs deserve, not just, when we make a cup of tea on Shabbos, so we're very kind of structured. I take a, kli rishon, a kli sheni, a kli shlishi, and we have a whole idea of how we do things. But when it comes to interpersonal mitzvahs, often it's very kind of, oh yeah, be a nice person, have good midas. Yes, be a nice person and have good midas. But there's a structure to the halacha, which we'll see soon from the sheet. So I want to do this in two parts. Part one is a little bit shorter than part two, but part one, I want to talk about the prohibition not to be judgmental of other people and see some of the many sources on that. So the first source I brought here, although we'll see, of course, it's a Torah mitzvah, we'll see what that mitzvah is from Pirkei Avos. So Hillel Omer, quite famous source, don't be too full of yourself or believing yourself until, until the day that you die, because you never know. You may let yourself down. We'll see Yochanan, Kohen Gadol, was a righteous person for 80 years, and then he went off the derech in his old age. So don't be too proud of yourself until you're really done. And then from our perspective, what I'm interested in, never judge your friend until you have reached their place. Now, what does that mean until you have reached their place? And so let's start with a couple of classic interpretations. Look at number 2 and 3. Number 2 is Rabbi Vadim Bar Tanura. On the Mishnah there, he says, if you see your friend who has had a struggle and has failed in that struggle, don't judge them unfavorably. Until you have exactly the same struggle that you saw them had, and you succeed. Until you succeed in their struggle, who are you to be judgmental of them? You never know whether you would have succeeded. And of course, the reality is you can never know, because you're not them. You're you. And I'm me. And until you're mamash, and we'll see this later in the page, in the head of, in the life of, with their upbringing, with their DNA, and with their hard wiring in their brain, you don't know how people manage, and you're certainly not in a position to be judgmental of them. Rabbeinu Yonah goes a little bit further. Number 3, Al Yoma, never turn around and say, if I were in their place, I would never have done this thing. Of all the bad things they do, I would never do that. You really never know, says Rabbeinu Yonah. But you have your desires and lusts like they do. B'nai Adam, like ordinary people do. Nobody is a perfect tzaddik. Maybe this trait that you're looking for is also pretty low when it comes to you and me as well. When you get to their place, and to their level, and then you manage to overcome your own issues in life, then, and only then, you have permission to start thinking about them and to in any way judge them. And again, it's saying that since you'll never really get into their head, you can never judge another person. You can never judge another person's yetzer hara. Everyone has their own yetzer hara. This person feels strongly to this, inclined to this, but other person doesn't understand. Well, why would you have an addiction to this? Like, why? I don't understand. What's wrong with you? The answer is you don't understand. That's the whole point, because you have a different addiction. You have a different problem, not this problem. The Meiri, which I didn't read on the sheet because it's quite long and we only have so much time, actually says even when it comes to the mitzvot, where a person would have to give up their life rather than transgress, and he's talking about people who converted to Christianity. Even a person who becomes a meshumad in the Middle Ages, the Meiri is writing in Provence in the 1300s, and you say, well, goodness, there's only 3 mitzvahs you have to give up your life for. How did you convert? The answer is, well, who are you to say that? You can't judge that person. You don't know how you would have withstood in that ordeal. God forbid you should ever have it. And then, so even with the people who, if you like, quotes and quotes, have done the worst of all things that can be done, you can't be judgmental of them as individuals. And that's a line that he draws. He also gives more of a drush, which is, it's not the pshat, if you like, but he says, what does it mean, never judge a person until you've come to their place? He says, until you've seen how they behave at home when nobody else is looking, you don't really know how they are. Oh yeah, they're a big tzaddik in public. Yes, when everybody else is watching. You go to their place and see how they behave when no one else is watching, and then you can know who they really are. So that's an interesting idea. And he brings the Sforno in number 4 brings Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol, a very stark example. Number 4, Al Tadin, it's Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Don't even judge Yochanan Kohen Gadol as a Rasha. until you're in his place. You don't know what it would have been like in the time of the Sadducees when he lived. If you'd have lived in his times, you'd have gone off. Maybe you'd have gone off before you were 80. He managed to withstand till he was 80. Maybe you'd have been out of here. It reminds me, there's a Gemara that talks about Menashe, King Menashe, who went after every avodah zarah in the world. And I think it's Rav Ashi in the Gemara says, I can't understand it. Like someone of that stature in those days would have been attracted to such nonsense. And Menashe appears to him in a dream and says, if you'd have lived when I lived, you'd have picked up your coat and run to avodah zarah. But that's not your thing. You don't understand what the Yetzer Hara was. You have your own issues. So don't judge other people because they sin in ways that are different from you and different from me. They're very important. On a more Hasidish note, I'm not such a Hasidish person, but I think maybe as you get older, maybe you should become a bit more Hasidish. Let's look at Rabbi Nachman of Breslov in number 5. When you sit down and start talking about other people, Zeh bechinat Rosh Hashanah. You basically set up a beis din. You're judging other people. Shehu Yom HaDinah, and that's a Yom HaDin. Shehu Yoshev Adanitz Chaveri, you're sitting and judging your friend. V'tzarich lizah, you don't want to get into Rosh Hashanah. Nobody wants to get into Rosh Hashanah because Rosh Hashanah is too scary. Ulistakil al atzmoi heitev im hu roi lezeh lishpot et chaveri. You have to look at yourself very well before you think whether you are in a position to be the judge. You're the dayan on Rosh Hashanah. Ki hamishpat le'elokim hu. God is the judge. You're not the judge. And he gives a beautiful idea here. Only God can judge another person. And this is what they mean when they say, Al tadin es chaverecha till you reach his makom. The only one who is really in the place of another person is Hashem. And he quotes from Bereshit's Rabbi, a very famous phrase as well, that God is the place of the world, and the world is not his place. Why do we call God Hamakom? Hamakom, especially when we're consoling people or helping people. Hamakom, because the whole world exists, if you like, within the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I get into the philosophy of this. This is actually technically called panentheism, that the world is inside, in a sense, God is beyond the world as well, but the world is all in God's place. So the only person that can actually spiritually be in the place of another human being is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is that place. The Rambam, who is far from Hasidish, actually gives a very interesting and intriguing line in Hilchos Tshuva. He says, God knows us because God knows himself. And when God wants to look into what we're doing, he just looks into himself in that sense that we are in the same makom as God, whatever that means. I don't know what that means Kabbalistically, but one thing's for sure, you and I are not in the same makom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in that makom, and therefore you can't be the judge. Only Hashem can be the judge. Just to finish off this part, look at number 6, I brought you from Rav Chalap. Rav Chalap, one of the main Talmidim of Rav Kook, says, Ad kidei kach, it has to be such, shelo yimsa es atzmo klal nifrad miha'ish hazeh sherotzeh ledono. That you have to feel that you are actually the same person. You are in exactly the same position. Hang on, I've come up. This in my pocket? Perfect. You're actually the same person. Whenever we think critically or think of judging another person, we have to think, well, I can only judge that if I can judge myself in that way. And that's what it means you come to that place. You feel that yourself as ki ata hu anidon. You are the judged. You are being judged. You're sitting in his place, al safsal haneh shamim, on the bench of the accused. And I brought you in at the bottom here a Chabad story of the idea whenever this was, I think, was the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, whenever he would have anyone who revealed anything negative that they'd done, he would always try to find in himself that before I can even deal with this person, where is the same thing in myself that I've done that thing? Because until I can judge myself in that way, I can't even begin to think about anybody else. Okay, so I think this is pretty clear. Judgmentalism is really not good. And yet everybody's very judgy. And that's a problem. That's a problem. In a sense, this is exactly the sinat chinam that we talk about all the time. People translate sinat chinam really incorrectly. It really annoys me, actually. As we move towards Tisha B'Av, everyone rolls out the same tropes. It's baseless hatred. Come on. Hatred is very strong. I don't think most people hate anybody, really. And even when they use the word, they really hate things. And they certainly don't hate anyone for no reason. That's just psychotic. Nobody hates people for no reason. Baseless, sinat chinam means rejection of other people personally. And there's a whole shiur on that, why that means that. But this is really what's going on here. And that's, I think, one of the problems. Every year we say, oh, don't do baseless hatred. Okay, well, I don't do that, so I'm not part of the problem. So he must be part of the problem. The problem is, that's why there's still a problem, because everyone thinks that they're part of the problem, not me. I like Musa Shiurim. He really needs to hear it. Yeah, that's the kind of idea. So what's the Torah prohibition? Where does it say that you can't do this in the Torah? Okay, this is we started at Pirkei Avot. So we'll see. First of all, Rav Hirsch, we'll see in a minute, thinks that this is the same as the mitzvah of judging other people favorably. But actually, that's not the approach that we're going to take tonight. We're going to see this is, in a sense, the opposite, because there is a Torah mitzvah that you are obligated to judge. Okay, that seems a bit strange because we've just said exactly the opposite, and we'll see how they come together. But according to that approach, which is that you are obligated to judge, and we'll see what that means, the mitzvah not to be judgmental is very straightforward. It's v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. This is the classic. Never do to other people what you wouldn't want them to do to you. We don't like being judged. We wouldn't judge other people. And not to reject another person in your heart, in your mind. So there are many, many Torah mitzvahs. We often don't think of these mitzvahs that come along. And certainly judging other people in a way which is judgmental would be a breach of those mitzvahs. And we all do it. And it's hard not to do it because it's easy to pull yourself up by putting others down. But that's something which is essential, which we can't. Okay, good. So that's not to be judgmental. That's not the chiddush. I think everybody knew that. But the new part is this part. Look at number 7. There is a mitzvah in the Torah to be a judge. Let's see what this means. Number 7. Lo sasu adol b'mishpat. Don't twist judgment. Lo sisa pnei dal. Don't favor the poor. And don't give honor to the rich or the people who are superior in society. But tzedek tishpod amitecha. But rather judge your amitecha. Amitecha is your friend. But tzedek. What does but tzedek mean? So again, I have mostly young. Most of my students are 17, 18 years old. I say to them, what does but tzedek mean? And they say, with righteousness. And I say, oh, come on. You never use the word righteousness ever in your life. Find me a word that sounds more real. When people give words to Hebrew terms, to halachic terms that are weird, that just means that they don't relate to those terms. Okay, but tzedek means fairly. Judge your friend fairly. Tzedek. So what's going on here? Who is this talking to? Well, it sounds like it's talking to a judge. Don't twist judgment. Don't be, don't favor the poor and don't favor the rich and all that. And Rashi, number 8, says, "But tzedek tishpod amitecha k'mashma'o." This is what it sounds like. A list of mitzvahs for the judge in a courtroom. But then he says, "Davar acher," but I have a problem with that pshat. Why does it sound like it's not talking to a judge? What is the word in this verse that doesn't fit with a judge in a courtroom setting? The answer is amitecha. Friends. You can't have friends in court. I think it's even especially in English. There are no friends in court. If my mother-in-law, who is Ruth's mother, used to be a judge, she's retired now, and my father-in-law used to be an expert witness, police doctor. So every now and then they would find themselves in the same court together, my mother-in-law judging a case that my father-in-law was given evidence on. And of course, immediately, one of them had to withdraw. You can't have that. You can't have a husband and wife, friends in court. You can't do that. In fact, my mother-in-law chose to serve on a bench. She was a magistrate, which was actually outside the area in which my father-in-law practiced to try and avoid those kind of clashes. You don't have amitecha in court. And therefore, Rashi says, there must be another reason. There must be another pshat here. Davar acher, havidan et chavercha lekaf zchut. Oh, completely different pshat. You have to judge your friend, because this is the amitecha, chavercha, lekaf zchut. And what's a kaf? A kaf is a spoon. So a kaf is on a scale, when you're weighing down on one side and the other side, moznaim, That is the kaf is the kaf schut or the kaf chav. One of my many embarrassing moments in Israel when I'm speaking poor Hebrew, which my kids used to get a great kick out of because they used to walk around listening to me doing this, was when I went into a shop. We needed to buy some bathroom scales, and I asked for moznayim. And my son looked at me and he said, "Are you serious? Actually, like an apothecary uses moznayim. I think you mean a mishkal, Dad. Whatever." There were many, many, many such occasions, and still are, but my son's just too polite to laugh now. Okay, fine. But the question here is, what does this mean? Lekaf schut, meaning I have scales, and I have to judge my friend and push it down into the favorable. I have to make sure that it's on that side. Well, 1 second. That is the opposite of what a judge does. If a judge sits in court and is listening to evidence and is all the time trying to think, well, maybe, okay, the guy stabbed someone 8 times with a knife, but maybe they were just trying to open an envelope or something, I don't know, and it's just like, he just went horribly wrong. Come on, you can't do that. Your job as a judge is to be completely impartial, not like kaf chav and not like kaf schut, to be totally impartial. How can these two things be in the same verse? Not the same thing. The Rashi says 2 pshatim. One is the judge has to be impartial, but tzedek, and the other is you have to judge your friend favorably. That's not but tzedek. That's favorably. That's not honestly. That's not fairly. And I brought you Rav Hirsch. You can look at Rav Hirsch later. He wants to try and say that one is personal and one is when it comes to the courtroom, and there's no contradiction. And he sees that the mitzvah not to judge other people is the same as the mitzvah to judge people favorably. You can read Rav Hirsch later on. He basically is taking in a position that there that there is, you can put these two things together. But I want to actually take the opposite position. And this is based on the shiurim I heard many, many years ago from my Rosh Hashiva, Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz. I was very fortunate to be in a kollel for a number of years with Rav Berkowitz as the Rosh Hashiva. And he has a particular speciality. Okay, we spend most of the time doing what you do in kollel and learning, ksubas and yavamas, and in smicha learning nidar and kashrus and Shabbos. But he said, we had a Friday kollel in which he said we have to learn bein adam lachaveiro in the same kind of depth as we do the rest of the week other things, and that's quite rare. These things are not often learnt in that way. And he pointed out to me and to the others in the kollel the analysis that I'm going to give you now, which basically goes along a different line and says as follows. There is something else going on here. There is a mitzvah to judge other people. You have to judge other people, but we'll see in a minute what you're judging is not who they are, but what you saw. What just happened in front of me? It's unclear what happened in front of me. For example, you see your rabbi sitting in McDonald's and eating something that looks a bit like a cheeseburger or whatever they eat in McDonald's with other people. What happened there? Is my rabbi now eating treif? If he invites me to dinner on Friday next week, do I turn around and say, well, I'm really sorry, I can't go to the rabbi. Clearly the rabbi's gone off, he's gone nuts and he's sitting eating cheeseburgers. Is that what happened here? Or is that not what happened here? Do I have to look at this situation and say, something? I'm seeing something here that's very confusing. I'm seeing someone that looks like a rabbi, and he's eating something that looks treif. What actually is happening? What is the most likely thing to be happening here? I'm not judging him as a person. That we saw, you can't do that. Absolutely not. Even Yochanan Cohen Gadol, the biggest rabbi of them all. No, can't judge anyone. But I'm not judging him. I want to know what's going on here. I don't know what's going on here. I had a shaila. I used to be a lawyer. For many years, I was a corporate real estate lawyer in London, and there is a real lack of kosher restaurants in London, still to this day. This was 30 years ago, and it's still the same. There's not much, You want to take a client out for lunch in London, you're going to go to Rubin's. Rubin's is only vaguely described as a restaurant in any kind of the way the restaurant works. It's not the same as going to like Wolf and Lamb in Manhattan. Rubin's is like a chavaya. It's a kind of Yiddish Jewish experience. It's like going to Yiddish theater, Rubens. So most of my clients and I, when I was a lawyer, used to go out to treif restaurants, glatt treif, rabbits hanging on the walls and all that kind of stuff. Really, really treif. So I asked a shaila, am I allowed to eat there? I used to eat a bit of cucumber, half a tomato. I used to have a very straightforward lunch. I used to fax them in advance, before emails. So yes, you're allowed to eat there, no problem. You eat half a tomato, you're fine. So should I keep my kippah on or should I take my kippah off? So it was absolutely clear. You should absolutely keep your kippah on. No question about it. Someone who sees you sitting in a restaurant with rabbits hanging on the wall, wearing a kippah, that tells them like, oh, okay, there's like the dissonance going on here. Here's a man who clearly wants to associate as a religiously observant person, and yet okay, what's going on here? But like if you have to break Shabbos because, I don't know, someone's having a baby, you have to drive them, do you change into your weekday clothes or do you wear your Shabbos clothes? You wear your Shabbos clothes and you drive down the road on Shabbos with your Shabbos clothes on. Actually, I'll tell you a funny thing. One of my non-Jewish colleagues, clients rather, not colleagues, that I went out with many times for lunch over the years. 11 years I was a lawyer. Actually, after 8 or 9 times, turned around to me and said, look, it was a lady, I hope you don't mind me mentioning, but I've noticed you have the same thing every time we go out. You have like cucumber, half a tomato, and, whatever, a bit of avocado. I assume you do this for religious reasons, right? I said, yes, I kosher. She goes, oh, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. She says, I hope you don't mind me asking, but if you do this for religious reasons, why are you not a lot thinner? Yeah. Achaya? And a good question. I didn't. I also asked myself the same question many times. But what's going on here is I'm seeing something which is dissonant. There's a story of Rav Shimon Schwab. Rav Shimon Schwab went down on the subway. He was in Washington Heights in New Manhattan, and he went down the subway and saw one of his balabatim eating a treifa hot dog. Now, nobody's perfect, and even the balabatim in Breuer's in Washington Heights must have a yetzer hara. You don't really see much of it, but they must have one. But I can guarantee you they don't have a yetzer hara to eat hot dogs in public by a public hot dog stand on the subway. So Rav Shimon says, okay, something else is going on here. Obviously, there's something more to this than I know. A few days later, he was given this man's name as a list to visit in a hospital. He went to visit him. He says, oh, what's the problem? He says, no, I have this bleeding ulcer. And when I have an attack, the doctors have told me I've got to put something in my system as soon as I can. It doesn't matter what it is. And you'll never guess the kind of strafus I've had to eat. And, and he says, well, I could guess. Yeah, I could guess, actually, maybe what you've had to. And he realizes there's something else going on. But other cases are less straightforward. Let me give you another example. This is much less straightforward. We'll see how this works. Let's say there's a young lady in your community, and her family. She's in her early 20s, whatever, late teens. Nice family, nice girl. You don't know her very well, but then you're driving through town in a slightly more sort of sketchy part of town, and you see this girl walking down the street. That's interesting. Stop the car on the other side. She can see you. You're watching her. And she goes into this very shady-looking establishment, which, it's a druggy kind of area. People are selling stuff, dealing stuff. And she goes in there. She speaks to someone. She walks out like with a sketchy-looking bag of whatever it is. And she looks around and she shoves it in her coat. And then she walks up the street. Okay. And you witnessed all of this. So what just happened there? Now, you could turn around and say, well, it's none of your business. And that might be the right answer. Except, what if she's babysitting for your children or grandchildren tonight? Does that change whether you feel it's your business? What if somebody calls you next week and asks for a recommendation for this young woman? Hey, is she honest? We're going to give her a job. Or what about a shidduch? Is there anything about this girl that you think we should know before she gets married to my son? I don't know. That's a good question. Is there anything? I don't know. Is this relevant information or is this not relevant? How do I know that? How do I know what to do? It's a really interesting question. Again, I'm not judging her as an individual, even if she is, God forbid, a drug addict. Who am I to judge who gets into what? But I do need to know. It really is important. I need to fill in this information because I need to be able to maybe do something with that. Maybe I'll decide to ignore it. Maybe I'll decide to say something. Maybe I'll speak to her family. Maybe I'll approach her. I don't know. That's the next stage. First, I have to work out what happened, and it's important. So let's have a look at that. We'll see here the opening to this also in Pirkei Avos in a minute. So let's look first of all at Rabbeinu Yom. The mitzvah in the Torah, but tzedek tishbad amitecha. So is that a Torah mitzvah or is it not a Torah mitzvah? The answer is, of course it's a Torah mitzvah. It's in the Torah. Okay? Look at number 10. Yesh alecha lahatzas hasofik. You with me on page 3? Yesh alecha lahatzas. Does everyone have page 3? Yeah. Okay, top of page 3, number 10. You have an obligation to take doubts and to push them into the positive, favorable. We'll see this tomorrow in a minute. If you judge other people favorably, God will judge us favorably, which is an interesting question. What does it mean God will judge us favorably? I'm not getting into that now. Okay. This is a Torah mitzvah. Okay, of course it is. But tzedek tishbad amitecha is a posuk. It's a verse in the Torah. But then in number 11, when you see where it says you have to judge everybody favorably, there the Rambam says, number 12, it's a derech chasidut, like many things in Pirkei Avot. It's extra. It's a chasidut. It's an extra act of piety. And so too, he rules in number 13, when he rules in Hilchos Deos, Talmid Chacham, if you're a Talmid Chacham, you represent Torah, Lo yehei tzoek, you shouldn't scream, v'tzavech, and shout, b'shal dibur when you speak. Kebehemus v'chayis, you shouldn't be sound like a wild animal. V'lo yagbi akola b'yosi, you shouldn't lift up your voice. Ela dibur b'nachas, you should speak always in a pleasant way, in kol brias, with all other people. Magdim shalom kol ala kol adam, you should always be the first to say hello. Kidei shetei rucham nochem, and so that people find you a pleasant individual. V'danes kol adam lechoskus, you should always judge people favorably. Well, second, that's the Talmid Chacham. A Talmid Chacham who has a higher level, he should judge favorably. Well, everybody should judge favorably. It's a posuk in the Torah. The Torah is not giving mitzvot to Talmidei Chachamim. It's giving mitzvot to everybody. So what's going on here? Is this a Torah mitzvah or is it not a Torah mitzvah? And you may have spotted already the opening, the petach to the answer, which is that the Torah mitzvah says amitecha. It's your chaver. Whereas what does it say in Pirkei Avos? Avidan et kol ha'adam. Who's kol ha'adam? That's different. That's not chavercha. And we'll see right now how we analyze this, and hopefully you'll find it interesting and applicable. Number 14. Number 14 is the most important source on the whole sheet. Let's look at this together. The Rambam opens this up for us. In his commentary on the Mishnah. If there's someone you don't know, a random individual, you see doing something in the street. But I take that in tzaddik or Rosh. You don't know if they are a tzaddik or a Rosh. The tzaddik and Rosh for the Rambam, and in most cases, doesn't mean the way we use the words. We use tzaddik often to mean this like totally pious individual, and Rosh to mean this, whatever, like the Rosh, the picture of the Rosh in the Haggadah, this awful, wicked. Here, tzaddik just means someone who does the right thing in a given choice. Rosh means someone who does the wrong thing. But you don't know, because this is a kol adam. This is a random individual walking in the street. And you see them doing something, or saying something. If you explain it a certain way, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's fine what they did. But if you say, if you understand it differently, it could be bad. It could be lashon hara. I don't know, but I don't know them. They're random people. Says the Rambam. What does it say in Pirkei Avos? Judge favorably. Why not? Why should you do that? Why think negatively about people? Meaning, do you know? No. Can you judge really? No. Does it matter? No. You're never going to see this person again. You don't know who they are. You can't be a judge because you have no information. It's like saying to a judge a case, we have no evidence. Well, with no evidence, I can't judge. So if you see some random person doing something, be a glass half full person. That's what Pirkei Avos is saying. It's not the Torah mitzvah of judging because you have nothing to go on. You just have, what I can see. I have no background information. Think of the world as a positive place. Why not? And it doesn't make any difference. Give you another case. Let's say you see somebody taking a pot of cottage cheese in the Makolet and putting it in their bag and walking out. What happened here? Am I witnessing a shoplifting event? Or did the guy just go to the Makolet guy and say, hey, I bought this yesterday and it's out of date? Has that ever happened to you? Possibly, yeah. And the guy, okay, beside, just take another one. I'll put it behind. I mean, you're lucky if he doesn't put it back on the shelf. But okay, he's put it behind. And said, take another one. It's fine. Maybe that happened. That's fine. But normally it doesn't make any difference. I don't know you. You don't know me. And I don't care. So judge favorably. What happens if this guy comes to you for a job interview next week? Oh, I don't know. It actually does matter for me if your hand's in my cash register, whether you are a shoplifter or not. That does matter to me now. But this case, he says, kol adam, makes no difference. Be positive. Next box. Aval, second box, number 14. Aval in hu ish yadua. If it's somebody you know, your friend, your colleague, shehu tzaddik, and you know that they are a tzaddik, and here a tzaddik doesn't mean that they're perfect. A tzaddik means they don't do this thing wrong. What you just saw them do now, they wouldn't do that. They would never do that. You know it's well known that they wouldn't do that. And you see that them doing something that looks terrible. It looks 99% bad. The only way you can explain it as something good is extremely far-fetched and extremely unlikely. It really looks terrible. But they're a tzaddik. You have to judge it favorably. Why? So since there's a chance it could be good, you can't suspect them. And that's why when it says, if you suspect people who are kosher, who are tzaddikim on this, then you've done an aveira, you've done a Torah prohibition, you deserve malchus, the Torah lashes. Why? Because the person's a tzaddik. What does a tzaddik mean? You know and I know that religious people, people who are observant people, some things they do right, some things they do wrong. Yeah? If I see someone I know to be a Frum Shomer Shabbos Jew eating treifa hot dogs on the subway, then I know that they don't eat treifa hot dogs. They just don't. They wouldn't. And if they did, which I doubt they ever would, they wouldn't do it in the middle of the subway. So obviously they're a tzaddik. Obviously there's something else going on. Oh, maybe they changed. Maybe they just went off the derech. The answer is that's not how we run life. We run life on the basis of what's called chazaka. Chazaka means the status quo ante remains that going forward until I know that it doesn't. Every time I take one step in front of the other, I assume the ground's still going to be there. Oh, maybe, I don't know, there's an earthquake, the ground could open up in front of me, it could be a sinkhole. I don't live life like that. If the ground's there now, it'll be there in 5 minutes. Okay? If a person's alive now, they'll be alive tomorrow. Be'ezrat Hashem, usually that's the case. A guy gives someone a get to give to his wife in LA. And I get on a plane and I fly, and 2 days later, what do you think? Oh, I don't know, maybe the guy, God forbid, got knocked down by a truck, You don't have to think that. Most people who are alive today are alive tomorrow. Be'ezrat Hashem. A tzaddik today is a tzaddik tomorrow, until you know that they're not. Once you know that they're not, they're not. But that's if they're a tzaddik. Not everybody is a tzaddik for everything. I know from Orthodox Shomer Shabbos people, when it comes to eating treifa hot dogs, they're a tzaddik. When it comes to parking properly in the street, they ain't no tzaddik. So I see somebody, Shomer Shabbos guy, it's Friday morning, he's double parked, running in for challahs. What am I going to think? Oh, maybe there was a challah emergency. Maybe somebody in the house needs challah, otherwise they're going to die. And it's like, oh, come on. That's not what's going on. You think guy's a tzaddik for parking? He's not a tzaddik for parking. I don't have to judge that favorably. Look in the bottom paragraph. The Kanim who Rasha. Let's say the guy's a Rasha. And again, Rasha doesn't mean a wicked person. Rasha here means they don't keep that. I know they don't keep that. I'm not judging them. I'm not such a great parker myself. I don't always do the best on the road, but but they don't do this right. And they know that they just don't do. And then you see them right now who it's a then you see them doing something that's 99% good. It's the flip side. Uboy said, and it's very unlikely to be bad. Look at what the Rambam says. You have to distrust them. You have to stay clear of them. You can't believe any good in it, since it could be bad. That's the Torah mitzvah. Interestingly. But tzedek, tishvod, amitecha doesn't mean dana kaf zchut. When you see random people, okay, dana kaf zchut, be a glass half full. But when you see someone with context, and I know what they're like, and they would never do this wrong, so they're not doing it wrong. And when I see them doing something that looks bad, and I know that they would do that wrong, then they are doing it wrong. Of course they're doing it wrong. I should think they're doing it right. They're not doing it right. Let's say there's a person that lives next door to me who doesn't keep kosher, and he invites me for dinner. Okay, I don't judge him. He keeps kosher. He doesn't keep kosher. He's got his own life, whatever. So he invites me. Can I eat there? No, he doesn't keep kosher. Yeah? So like I see him running around all the restaurant, all the shops. Is this the Dats? Is this Mahadran? And now he keeps kosher. Oh, now I can eat there. No, he didn't just switch overnight. I can't eat there even if it looks like because over time, maybe if he becomes more connected, but people are who they are, and I have to judge actions for what they are. And if it's a tzaddik, it's obviously good, even if it looks terrible. And if it's a Rasha, it's obviously not good, even if it looks great. Okay? Because you're going to be a judge. Wasn't there a problem? You're the judge. Wasn't there like a You're the judge, or something like that. Whatever, fine. But then what about a middle case? Look at number 50. Imhu mina beinonim. Oh, what if they're a beinoni? And you can see how it's a little bit, it's very structured now. When I see something, I see, what did I see? How good does it look? 90%, 80%, 60%? And are they a tzaddik? Are they a rosha? Are they a beinoni? Who's a beinoni? A beinoni is someone who tries to avoid it, but sometimes they can't resist. People are a tzaddik for some things, a rosha for other things, and a beinoni for other things. I try, but I don't always get it right. What should you do then? Because then you can't just push it one way or the other because there's no chazakah, there's no presumption. So he says like this about you should try leave it as a question. If you can make it to the positive, then do. You judge the people favorably, God will judge you favorably. For whom mitzvah sasim in a Torah. This is actually the Torah mitzvah, as it says, but if it looks even 51% bad, they're not tzaddik. You can't assume it's okay. Then you have to leave it as undecided. I cannot decide that it's good. I cannot decide. I just don't know. Don't decide it's definitely bad, but you're a judge. Again, they're not a tzaddik, they're not a rosh. You see someone, I think that everyone's different, but a lot of people try very hard not to speak lashon hara, but every now and then, there are some people who are tzaddikim, yes, and they would never pass their lips. I don't know if there are many. There are some people who are ba'alei lashon hara. I don't know many people like that either, who all the time are gossiping about other people. I don't see that very often. Most people are beinonim. Most of the time they try hard, they succeed, but every now and then they can't resist, whatever. So then I have to judge. Does it look like lashon hara? Does it not look like lashon hara, etc.? Again, why does it matter? It may not matter, in which case, fine, just get on with life, but it may matter. Because like I said, what about this girl with the drugs? What are you going to do then? She's babysitting your grandchildren, your children's parents. Is she taking drugs? Is she selling drugs? What's the case there? So again, according to this, you'll have to say, is she a tzaddik? That means that I can say that a person like that of their age in society would never, ever, in a million years, ever possibly be involved in drugs. Can you say that? I don't know. I don't think so. All sorts of people are into all sorts of things. It's not always their fault, but are you going to tell you that she's a drug addict? Okay, if I know she's a drug addict, what do you think she's doing in a place that looks like they sell drugs? She's buying drugs. That will be a rosha for this. Maybe she's a beinoni, in which case I have to say, okay, what does it look like? It looks pretty bad. She's in a sketchy area of town and she's buying something. It looks pretty bad. So maybe she's a beinoni, in which case I have to leave it as a suffix. And maybe I do have to intervene. And maybe I don't want her to babysit my kids tonight. Well, on the other hand, I'm not going to say to someone, oh yeah, you should know before you marry her, she's a drug addict. God forbid, because you don't know that. On the other hand, you can't say definitely not. You have to be judicious and think of it in that way. So you see, just from this little presentation, we'll finish off in a second, how this question of judging facts, judging situations, which you have to do, is very structured. You have to think, who are they? Tzaddik, Rosha, Beinoni. How does it look? Does it look good? Does it look bad? And how does that fit with the chazakah of who they are? Okay, good. Let's just go over the page to the last page, and then we'll finish up with a couple of other things. Interesting, number 17. Look at number 17. This is fascinating. Tana de Yishmael, the Gemara says, Imra'ita Talmid Chacham. A Talmid Chacham here means someone who represents Torah, who stands up and represents Torah. Usually Talmid Chacham doesn't always mean someone who's a knows, but it could be mean someone who knows a lot as well. It usually is. Sha'ava Aveira Balali. You see them doing something in the evening. They definitely did it. Al Tahar Achara Bayon. Don't even think the next day that they will still do this. Shema asa tshuva, because they might have done tshuva, says the Gemara. Shema, maybe they did tshuva. Elavadai asa tshuva, but they definitely did tshuva. They're a religious person. They definitely did tshuva. They wouldn't do it again. But then the Gemara says, this is in regular things. But when it comes to money, no. Doesn't matter how frum they are. Doesn't matter how big a Talmid Chacham they are. When it comes to money, people don't behave good. Okay? Until you know they've given the money back, you have to think, well, you know something? People, even the Talmid Chachamim, you can't. And there's another area as well which says when it comes to sexuality, ein apitropos la'arayos. And again, you don't judge, and who's to judge, and nobody is the tzaddik gomer. But when it comes to those two areas of life, when it comes to money, when it comes to sexuality, all bets are off. because anybody honestly could get into anything because of the way that we're wired and the yetzer haras that we have, which is, I think, is very, very interesting. We'll finish with number 18 in a second, but let me just mention two other things. As I said before, there is a mitzvah not to judge people kasherim, and if a person does that, loike begufa, the Gemara says in number 19, they learn that from Moshe Rabbeinu. That Moshe Rabbeinu judged the famous midrash when God said, go tell the Jewish people, and he says, oh, well, they won't believe me. Well, you shouldn't say that. They will believe you because, Avram was a believer and they're believers, and he ended up with Saras, with the whole hand thing, that you're not allowed. And that's in the halach, it's in the Shulchan Aruch in the Mefarshim on the Shulchan Aruch in number 20. Number 21 is the flip side, which is, okay, we have a mitzvah not to judge people negatively in the situation if the case, requires that, but they also have an obligation. We have an obligation not to erase suspicion in other people, which is called chashad. People often confuse chashad and maris ayin. Maris ayin is where I do something which is technically right, but looks wrong, and people assume from that, oh, I didn't know you could do that. That's great. Because I don't think they would ever do something wrong. They see me in the old days where like par of milk, back in the days, they used to have the carton on the table or something like that or par of butter, because people say, oh gosh, I didn't know you could have butter on steak. That's fantastic. I'm going to do that. That's maris ayin. The opposite is chashad. Chashad is they see you doing something and they don't think, oh, that's great because I didn't know they would never do it wrong. But they think, look at them. Look at them, pretend to be a big frummer and look at what they're into. And the Gemara gives the Mishnah, actually, the Gemara gives an interesting example in number 21, where the people that were in the Beis Hamikdash were not allowed to, who were dealing with the money, were not allowed to wear any clothing that could possibly lead them to accusations, nothing with pockets and nothing with hems. They weren't allowed to wear tefillin because you might slip a little coin in between. Oh, you think those people are going to do that? No, but you're laying yourself open to suspicion. And it's interesting, the Gemara, the Mishnah says there, because if they become rich, people will say, you know how they got rich, don't you? And if they become poor, people will still say, oh, they were stealing from the Beis Hamikdash, so God's made them poor as a punishment. I mean, you can't win. You can't win. People are going to think things of you. Therefore, you have to never put yourself in a situation which, leaves you open to accusations, which actually is very hard today as well. And there are things that might have been fine 30 years ago that are really not fine today. That people could say, well, he did this and he did that, or she did this and she did that. And you really need to think this through. And sometimes the halacha is not enough. I mean, you could say there's no problem of yichud if a man and a woman are driving in a car. You give someone a ride in a car and it's in the middle of the day and there's no halachic problem with that. There's no halachic problem with that. And maybe, you should, and it's a mitzvah of chesed. But what happens if someone says, oh, he touched me and it's very difficult. Like, how are you going to respond to that? And in today's world, it's very tricky. Let's just finish because Baruch Hashem, the voice is held up, and I think that's in your schut and in Arlene's schut. When I'm at home, I can't talk. But when I'm with you, I can talk. So let's just finish with number 18, and then we'll wrap it up. This is a beautiful Gemara. Look at this Gemara, and we'll finish with this. Tan Rabbanan. If you judge other people favorably, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will judge you favorably. It tells a story. But Adam Echad, there was a person, Shirad Galil, he came down from the Galil Ha'elyon, from the Upper Galilee. And he went to hire himself out as a worker, as a schlepper for a balabais in the south. Shalosh shonim, for 3 years. And the Gaonim actually say they had a tradition that the worker was Rabbi Akiva in his younger days before he was the great Rabbi Akiva, and the balabait was Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, who was one of the wealthiest people in Israel. And Rabbi Akiva was from no background. Even when he married his wife, remember the story, Rachel, her father dispossessed her because she didn't want to marry him, etc. So they had no money. So look at what happened. Erev Yom Kippurim, the story is very particular, second line, on Erev Yom Kippur, Amaloi, so Rabbi Akiva came up to the Balabais and said, Teni Schari, I actually would like my wages, please. I've been schlepping for 3 years. And I'll go and feed my wife and children at home. So Amaloi, so Rabbi Eliezer turns around to him and said, Ein limos, I have no money, sorry. Amalai, he said, okay, take me peiros, give me produce. Peiros doesn't only mean fruit, it means like produce. Amalai, he said, no produce. Really? I mean, what are all these like granaries full of produce? No, I've got nothing. Tainli karka, give me some land, maybe a deed to some land for the money. Ainli, I've got no land. Tainli behema, give me an animal or something. Ainli, I've got no animals. You've got no animals? You've got loads? Nope, got no animals. Tainli karim the cost is give me pillows, give me sheets, give me something. I can't go home after 3 years empty-handed. Ainli, I have nothing. Goodbye. Hifshil kelav lachayrav, he threw his pack on his back. V'halach lebeisen, he went back home, b'pachin nefesh, depressed and disappointed. La'achar haregel, that was on Erev Yom Kippur. After Sukkot, Natal Balabayis, Rabbi Eliezer comes from the south. He brought schara b'yadu, he brought the wages. Ve'imoi masu gimel chamerim, he brought 3 extra donkeys. Echad shel machal, one of food. Ve'echad shel mishte, one of drink. Ve'echad shel minim agadim, one of like treats. V'halach lebeisen, he went to visit the workers, Rabbi Akiva. Now, after they'd had dinner, he gave him his money. And here's the interesting thing. Amalai, he said to Rabbi Akiva, when you said to me, Tenli schari, give me my money, and I replied, I don't have any money. What did you think of me? I'm a wealthy man. What did you think I went? So he says, Amarti, I thought, maybe you had a sudden deal, and he took up your change. You know, sometimes it happens. Someone comes to you for stock or whatever. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got nothing on me. Oh, you've got nothing on? No, maybe I have nothing on me. I gave my cash. I used it up. This balabai said very quickly, he wasn't planning to leave. He had no cash. I thought you were out of cash. Okay, say that. Ubeshasha amartani, when you said to me, Taini behema, give me animals. Amarti eini behema, and I said, I have no animals. But machashanatani, what did you think then? Amarti, I thought maybe ulai. A shema rather, maybe they were leased out. Maybe these donkeys and horses were not yours. Cattle were not yours. They were leased out to other people. You couldn't give them. Okay. When you said, give me land, and I said to you, I've got no land. What did you think then? I thought, maybe your land was leased out. Okay, and you couldn't give it to me. When I said I've got no produce, come on, what did you think then? I thought maybe you hadn't had trumas and maasros taken, and you couldn't just give it to me. It was like a big, balagan. You had to take trumas and maasros. Okay. When I said to you, I have nothing to give you. Come on, what did you think? So Rabbi Akiva says to him, look, you've got nothing. Amarti, I thought to myself, maybe you've just made a neder, and you've given all of your property away to Shamayim. And it looks like you own things, but actually you don't own things, which is pretty unlikely. So he says to him, Amalei, he said to him, Ha'avoida, he makes a shavur. He says, I swear to you, that's exactly what happened. I actually vowed to give all my property away because I didn't want my son Hurkanus to inherit anything because he went, he wouldn't go to yeshiva. He went off the derech. Interesting story, by the way. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, his son was called Hurkanus. So why was his son called Hurkanus? Because he was named after his grandpa, Hurkanus. And there's a whole story about how the grandfather was not a really observant person, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus was a Baal Tshuva, and the grandfather dispossessed him because he says, I don't want you with these frummy people, they're all going to brainwash you, and you're not going to yeshiva, not on my money anyway. And there's a whole story when he comes to visit the yeshiva, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai pushes Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus to the front to give the drasha, and the father says, I didn't realize, I thought you were all brainwashed here, this is so beautiful, and he brought it back in the family, and it's great, but it's not so great because then the Baal Tshuva son, Eliezer ben Hurkanus, has a grandson who grows up an FFB, who actually wants to be more like his grandpa. And then he dispossesses his son. He says, for this I became Baal Tshuva so that you could go off and familiar kind of territory. It's very interesting story of grandparents, parents, and children. Anyway, he says, that's what happened. I wrote my son out of my property. But then I came to my colleagues and I realized I was a bit of a fool. Hitarti called Nadra, I did call Nidre, it was after Yom Kippur, and I get rid of my vows. And just like you judge me favorably, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should judge you favorably. And just to finish off, this story is fascinating because at every stage, Rabbi Akiva gave the most reasonable answer. When you said you had no cash, okay, you have no cash, people run out of cash. You have no land, maybe it was Only at the end, when he had a choice, he has nothing. So either Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenes, the Gadol Hador, on Erev Yom Kippur, come on, everybody's making some effort on Erev Yom Kippur, has told a laborer that labored for 3 years to go home empty-handed. That's one option. Or he's given all his money away because of some weird family situation. A very unlikely, on one side, maybe it's the other way. I mean, he's a tzaddik. Everyone's a little bit of a tzaddik on Erev Yom Kippur. It must be something else. And it was something else, like the guy with the hot dog. And therefore, that's what it's teaching you, not to just think random things, but to try think of the most reasonable thing. Sometimes when the option is far-fetched one way, so the reality is far-fetched another way. Like Bilam and the donkey, when Bilam's smacking the donkey, and the donkey turns around, he says, just 1 second, am I not the donkey that has been faithful to you all these years? Why are you smacking me on the head? Don't you think there might be something else going on here? Oh, yeah, okay. That's also a kind of done. Anyway, hopefully we've covered a lot of ground. Be'ezrat Hashem, it's been about an hour, which I think was my task here. Again, Phil, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Yes, Hashem should be an aliyah for the neshama, as for Arlene's neshama, Avigayil Freyda, Bas Mordechai. We should get together on many occasions to learn Torah and see each other soon. Be'ezrat Hashem. Thank you.
And I'll take you. 1 second. Still attached.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you all.
Phone's back on.
Thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed. I know that was very meaningful, very appropriate to my mother's memory, to thinking the best of people and having positive social situations. So thank you all for joining.
Yesh koyach.